The sound of her own sobbing was the only thing that broke the silence of the Colorado wilderness that night in 1876. And Adelaide Bennett knew she had never felt more alone in her entire 22 years of life. She knelt beside the wagon that had been her home for the past month, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white in the moonlight. The fever had taken her father 3 days ago, and they had buried him beside a creek that she could still hear bubbling somewhere in the darkness. Her mother had followed him just this morning, her last breath a whisper of Adelaide's name before the same sickness claimed her too. Now Adelaide was alone with a wagon she could barely manage, 2 horses that seemed to sense her incompetence, and supplies that would not last more than a few weeks even if she rationed carefully. The trail to Valentine had become impossible to follow after the storm 2 days back, and she had no idea if she was even heading in the right direction anymore. Every direction looked the same in this endless expanse of mountains and trees. "Please," she whispered into the night air, her voice cracking with exhaustion and grief. "Please, I need help. I cannot do this alone. Send me someone, anyone who can help me find my way. Give me the strength to survive this, or send me someone who can help me." The prayer felt desperate even to her own ears, but Adelaide had nothing left except desperation. Her aunt lived in Valentine, or at least she had 3 years ago when she had last written. That aunt was the only family Adelaide had left in this world, the only destination that made any sense. But Valentine might as well have been on the moon for all Adelaide knew about how to reach it. She stayed on her knees until they ached, praying words that became less coherent as exhaustion pulled at her consciousness. Finally, she climbed into the back of the wagon and pulled a blanket around herself, not bothering to change out of her dirt-stained dress. Sleep came in fits and starts, filled with dreams of her parents and fears of what morning would bring. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky pink when Adelaide woke to the sound of footsteps near the wagon. Her heart seized with fear, and she grabbed the small pistol her father had given her, though she had never actually fired it. Her hands shook as she peered through the canvas opening. A man stood beside the cold remains of her campfire, studying the ground with an expression of concentration. He was the largest human being Adelaide had ever seen, easily over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the rising sun. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back loosely with what looked like a strip of leather. He wore buckskin clothes that had seen heavy use, and a rifle was slung across his back, with the easy comfort of someone who carried weapons as naturally as breathing. His arms were thick with muscle, visible even through his shirt, and when he crouched down to examine something on the ground, Adelaide could see the power in every movement he made. This was not a man who had grown soft from town living. This was someone who had been carved by the wilderness itself. "I know you are awake in there," he said without looking up, his voice a deep rumble that somehow did not sound threatening despite the situation. "I can hear your breathing. I am not here to hurt you." Adelaide's grip on the pistol tightened. "Then why are you here? Saw your fire last night from up the ridge. Looked wrong, too small and too uncertain for experienced travelers. Figured someone might need help." He stood and turned to face the wagon, and Adelaide got her first clear look at his face. He had strong features, weathered by sun and wind, with a short beard that covered an angular jaw. His eyes were a striking blue-green color, like deep water in sunlight, and they regarded her with a directness that was almost unsettling. There was something in his expression that suggested he had seen more of life than most men twice his age, though Adelaide guessed he could not be much older than 30. "My name is Vincent Ellis," he said. "I have a cabin about 15 miles north of here." Been living in these mountains for near about 8 years now. I know every trail and every creek between here and Valentine." Adelaide felt something loosen in her chest at the name of the town. "Valentine. You know how to get to Valentine?" "I do. You trying to reach it?" Vincent's eyes moved past her to the interior of the wagon, and she saw his expression change as he took in the signs of sickness and death. "You alone out here, my parents?" Adelaide's voice broke and she had to swallow hard before continuing. "They got sick, both of them. I buried them, but I do not know which way to go anymore. I have an aunt in Valentine. She is all the family I have left." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was thinking through something complicated. "That is a hard thing," he said finally. "A hard thing to bear alone." "How long have you been by yourself?" "Since yesterday morning." Adelaide realized she was still pointing the pistol at him and slowly lowered it. "I prayed last night for help, for someone to help me find my way." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes at that, an expression Adelaide could not quite read. "Well," he said slowly, "I am not usually one to think too much about prayers and such, but the timing seems particular. I do not normally come down this far south, but I woke up this morning with a powerful feeling I needed to check on something. Found your tracks about an hour ago and followed them here." Adelaide climbed out of the wagon, still clutching the pistol though it now pointed at the ground. In the growing light of dawn, she could see that Vincent had been telling the truth about living in the mountains. His clothes were well made but worn, his boots were scuffed from hard use, and there was a quality about him that spoke of complete self-sufficiency. This was a man who did not need anything from anyone. "I do not have much money," Adelaide said quietly, "but I can pay you something if you would guide me to Valentine. I know it is asking a lot from a stranger." Vincent shook his head. "Keep your money. You will need it when you get to town." He walked over to the wagon and examined the wheels and the horses with the practiced eye of someone who knew what to look for. "Your back left wheel is close to losing a spoke and these horses are too nervous. They need someone with a firm hand. You ever driven a team before?" "Not really. My father always handled the animals." Adelaide felt heat rise in her cheeks at the admission of her own uselessness. "Nothing to be ashamed of. Driving a team is not something you just know without learning it." Vincent moved around to examine the supplies, and Adelaide found herself watching the way he moved, all controlled power and certainty. "You are light on supplies, too. Good thing Valentine is only about 3 days from here if we take the right trails." 3 days. Adelaide felt a surge of hope. "I thought it would be weeks. You were heading west instead of northwest. Easy mistake when the landmarks all look the same." Vincent straightened and looked at her directly. "Here is what I am proposing. I will guide you to Valentine, make sure you get to your aunt safely. In return, you do not have to pay me anything, but I would appreciate it if you did not tell too many folks you saw me. I prefer to keep to myself, and too much attention from town folks tends to complicate things." "Why would you help me for nothing?" Adelaide asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. "You do not know me." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "Because you prayed for help and I am here. Because I got 2 younger sisters back in Missouri who I have not seen in years, and I would hope if they were in trouble, someone would help them. Because it is the right thing to do." He paused. "And because no one should have to bury their parents and then face the wilderness alone." "That is not right." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes again, but she blinked them back. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not know what this means. I got some idea." Vincent turned toward where his own horse was tied to a tree some distance away. "Let me get my gear and we will fix that wheel spoke before we head out. Should not take more than an hour if the wood has not split too bad." As he walked away, Adelaide found herself breathing easier than she had since her father had first fallen ill. The mountain man moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and exactly how to survive in this harsh landscape. For the first time since her parents had died, Adelaide felt like she might actually make it to Valentine alive. Vincent returned leading a massive roan stallion that looked like it had been bred for power rather than speed. His saddlebags bulged with supplies, and he carried his rifle with the casual competence of someone who had used it many times. He tied the horse near Adelaide's team and immediately set to work examining the wagon wheel. "The spoke is cracked but not split," he said after a moment. "I can reinforce it enough to get us to Valentine, but you will need a proper wheelwright to look at it once we arrive." He dug through his saddlebags and produced tools and strips of rawhide that he used to bind the damaged spoke. Adelaide watched him work, fascinated by the sureness of his movements. His hands were large and scarred from hard use, but they handled the delicate work with surprising precision. The muscles in his forearms flexed as he tightened the rawhide bindings, and Adelaide found herself wondering what kind of life created a man like this. "How did you end up living alone in the mountains?" she asked, then immediately worried she had overstepped. "I am sorry, that is probably too personal a question." Vincent glanced up at her, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It is not a secret. I came west after the war ended in '65, could not settle back into regular life after all that fighting. Tried working in towns for a while, but too many people and too much noise made me feel like I was crawling out of my skin. Found these mountains and built myself a cabin where the only neighbors are deer and the occasional bear. Do you get lonely?" The question was out before Adelaide could stop it. "Sometimes," Vincent admitted. "But lonely is better than feeling trapped. I go into Valentine a few times a year for supplies, see people then. It is enough for me." He finished with the wheel and stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "Or at least it has been until now." Something in the way he said those last words made Adelaide's heart skip, but before she could analyze it, Vincent was already moving on to check the horse's tack. He made several adjustments to the harness, his hands gentle but firm as he calmed the nervous animals. "They are good horses," he said. "Just scared because they know their handler is scared. Horses are smart that way. They pick up on fear faster than anything." He looked at Adelaide steadily. "You are going to drive the wagon, and I am going to ride beside you. I will talk you through it, but you need to learn this. You cannot rely on me forever." Adelaide wanted to protest that she could ride in the back while he drove, but something in Vincent's expression told her he was right. She needed to learn these things if she was going to survive. "All right," she said, squaring her shoulders. "Show me what to do." For the next 30 minutes, Vincent taught her the basics of handling a team. He showed her how to hold the reins, how to signal turns, how to read the horse's body language. His instructions were clear and patient, and when Adelaide made mistakes, he corrected her without judgment. "You are doing fine," he said when she finally managed to get the wagon moving in a smooth line. "Better than fine, actually. You got a natural feel for it." The praise warmed Adelaide more than it probably should have. She found herself wanting to impress this mountain man, who had appeared out of nowhere like an answer to her desperate prayer. They traveled through the morning, with Vincent riding alongside the wagon and occasionally moving ahead to scout the trail. He navigated terrain that Adelaide would have thought impassable, finding paths through the forest that seemed to appear only when he needed them. The mountains rose around them in peaks of gray stone and green forest, beautiful and terrible in their vastness. Around midday, Vincent called for a halt near a small stream. "Horses need rest and water," he explained, "and we should eat something." Adelaide had been surviving on hardtack and jerky for days, but Vincent produced fresh bread and dried venison from his saddlebags that tasted like the finest meal she had ever eaten. They sat on rocks beside the stream, and Adelaide found herself studying him in the dappled sunlight. "You said you were in the war," she said carefully. "Which side?" "Union. Fought through Virginia and down into Georgia. Lost too many friends and saw too much that I wish I could forget." Vincent's jaw tightened. War does something to a man, changes him down deep where it does not wash out easy. "That is part of why I needed the mountains. Needed somewhere quiet where I could remember how to be human again." Adelaide heard the pain in his voice and felt a surge of sympathy. "My father was too old to fight, but he lost a brother at Shiloh. He never really talked about it, but sometimes I would catch him crying when he thought no one was watching." "Shiloh was bad," Vincent said quietly. "Real bad. I am sorry about your uncle." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the stream and the wind in the trees. Adelaide found it strange how comfortable she felt with this man she had known for only a few hours. There was something solid about Vincent, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since before her parents had gotten sick. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said suddenly. "Of course. Last night when you were praying, did you really think someone would come?" Adelaide considered the question carefully. "I did not know," she admitted. "But I had nothing else left except hope. I figured if there was any chance that prayers got answered, I needed to try. I was so scared and so tired, and I did not know what else to do." Vincent nodded slowly. "I am not much of a praying man myself. Lost my faith somewhere in the war and never quite found it again. But I cannot deny that me ending up here this morning feels like more than just coincidence. Like maybe something was pushing me in this direction whether I understood it or not." "Maybe something was," Adelaide said softly. "Maybe that is how prayers work sometimes. Not with lightning bolts from the sky, but with a man who happens to wake up with a feeling that he needs to go check on something." Vincent met her eyes, and Adelaide felt something pass between them, some recognition that went deeper than words. "Maybe so," he said finally. They traveled through the afternoon, making good time on trails that only Vincent could see. He pointed out landmarks and natural features, teaching Adelaide how to read the wilderness. "See how that ridge runs? That tells you which way is north. And the moss grows thicker on the north side of the trees here because we are high enough that the sun is stronger from the south." Adelaide absorbed every lesson, grateful for the knowledge and for the distraction from her grief. When she thought about her parents, the pain was still sharp enough to take her breath away. But when she focused on Vincent's instructions or on managing the horses, she could hold the grief at bay for a little while. As the sun began to sink toward the mountains, Vincent led them to a sheltered clearing beside another stream. "We will camp here tonight," he announced. "Good water, good cover, and a view of the approach so nothing can surprise us." He helped Adelaide unhitch the horses and set up a proper camp with an efficiency that spoke of years of practice. While Adelaide gathered firewood, Vincent scouted the perimeter and then produced a fishing line from his seemingly endless supply of useful items. "Stream looks like it might have trout," he said. "I will see if I can catch us some fresh dinner." Adelaide watched him walk down to the stream, his movements smooth and purposeful. She found herself admiring not just his competence, but the way he inhabited his body, as if every muscle knew exactly what it was supposed to do. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, just clean, efficient action. She shook her head, trying to clear away thoughts that felt inappropriate given that her parents had not even been dead for a full week. But there was something about Vincent that drew her attention like a lodestone drawing iron. Maybe it was just gratitude, she told herself. Or maybe it was the natural result of him being the only other human being in her current world. Vincent returned 20 minutes later with 4 good-sized trout, which he cleaned and prepared with the same practiced ease he brought to everything else. Soon they were cooking over the fire, filling the air with a smell that made Adelaide's mouth water. "You are very good at all of this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the camp, the fish, the organized way he had arranged everything for maximum efficiency. "Had a lot of practice," Vincent said with a slight smile. "When you live alone in the wilderness, you either learn to do things right or you do not survive very long. The mountains do not care about your mistakes. They will kill you just as dead whether you are a good person or a bad one." That sounds harsh. It is honest. I appreciate that about the wilderness. It does not lie or pretend. A storm is a storm, a bear is a bear, and if you are not prepared, that is on you. Vincent turned the fish expertly. People are more complicated. They lie and scheme and hurt each other for reasons that do not make any sense. Out here, things are simple. Hard, but simple. Adelaide thought about that as they ate. The fish was delicious, flavored with wild herbs that Vincent had gathered. She could not remember the last time she had eaten something that tasted this good. "What about your family?" she asked. "You said you had sisters in Missouri. Do you ever think about going back to see them?" Vincent's expression grew distant. "All the time. But I send them money when I can, and I write letters every few months. They know I am alive and thinking about them. Going back there would mean facing all the things I left behind, and I am not ready for that yet. Maybe someday, but not now. They must miss you. I am sure they do. And I miss them too, more than I can put into words sometimes, but this is the life I need right now." Vincent looked at her across the fire. "What about you? This Aunt in Valentine, are you close to her?" "Not really," Adelaide admitted. "I have not seen her since I was 19. She left our town in Pennsylvania after her husband died and came west to start fresh. My mother and her exchanged letters, but they were never very detailed. I know she runs a boarding house in Valentine, but beyond that, I do not know much about her life now." "But you are sure she will take you in?" "I have to believe she will. She is the only family I have left." Adelaide heard the desperation creep into her voice and tried to push it back. "What will I do if she will not help me? I have nowhere else to go." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his blue-green eyes reflecting the firelight. "If your aunt turns out to not be an option, we will figure something else out. Valentine is a good town, growing fast. There is work for people who are willing to do it. You would not be helpless. I do not have any skills that would be useful in a frontier town. I can sew a little and cook basic meals, but that is about all. My parents wanted to protect me, so they never taught me anything practical." Adelaide heard the bitterness in her own voice and was surprised by it. "You learned to drive a wagon team in one day," Vincent pointed out. "That tells me you can learn whatever you set your mind to. And sewing and cooking are plenty useful in a place like Valentine. Towns always need boarding houses and seamstresses and people who can run proper kitchens." "You are being too hard on yourself." Adelaide wanted to believe him, but fear still gnawed at her insides. "I just feel so unprepared for everything. My whole life I was told that my father would take care of me until I got married, and then my husband would take care of me. No one ever talked about what would happen if I ended up alone." "You are not alone right now," Vincent said quietly, "and I promise you will make it to Valentine safely. After that, we will see what happens, but you have more strength than you think you do. You buried your parents and kept yourself alive until help arrived. That takes courage." Adelaide felt tears threaten again and blinked them back furiously. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for helping me. I know I have already said it, but I mean it. You appeared like an answer to prayer, and I will never forget that." Vincent looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, shifting his weight and glancing away. Just doing what is right. Any decent person would do the same. I am not so sure about that. The world has plenty of people who would have seen a woman alone and taken advantage of the situation, but you have been nothing but kind and respectful. Adelaide hesitated, then added, "You are a good man, Vincent Ellis." "I try to be," Vincent said softly. "It is not always easy, but I try." They fell into silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. Adelaide found herself watching Vincent as he tended the fire and organized his gear for the night. There was something deeply attractive about his competence, about the way he moved through the world with such certainty. And it was not just his skills that drew her. It was the kindness in his eyes, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her, the way he made her feel safe without making her feel weak. These thoughts felt dangerous given how recently her parents had died and how little she actually knew about this mountain man. But Adelaide could not deny them. For the first time in her life, she found herself genuinely interested in a man, not because society said she should be thinking about marriage, but because something in her responded to something in him. As darkness fell completely and the stars emerged in spectacular profusion above them, Vincent showed Adelaide how to arrange her bedroll for maximum comfort and warmth. "Night gets cold up here in the mountains," he explained. "You want to wake up stiff and sore, you sleep wrong. You want to wake up ready to travel, you do it right." Adelaide followed his instructions, acutely aware of how close they were in the small clearing. Vincent had placed his own bedroll on the opposite side of the fire, maintaining a respectful distance that Adelaide appreciated even as some part of her wished he was closer. "You are safe here," Vincent said, as if reading her thoughts. "I will keep watch for a few hours before I sleep, and the horses will alert us if anything larger than a rabbit comes near. You need rest, Adelaide. You have been through more than anyone should have to bear in a single week." Adelaide realized he had used her first name for the first time, and it sent a small thrill through her. "Will you tell me something about yourself?" she asked. "Something that has nothing to do with survival or the war or anything heavy. I just want to hear another person's voice for a while." Vincent settled himself more comfortably, his rifle across his lap. "All right. Let me think." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "When I was a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, I decided I was going to build a raft and float down the Mississippi River all the way to New Orleans. I spent 2 weeks collecting wood and rope, working on this raft in secret down by the riverbank. I was convinced I was going to have grand adventures." "What happened?" Adelaide asked, finding herself smiling despite everything. "The raft fell apart about 20 feet from shore. I ended up waist-deep in muddy water with half the local kids watching and laughing at me. My mother tanned my hide when she found out what I had been doing, told me I could have drowned and given her a heart attack with worry." Vincent chuckled at the memory. "But the funny thing is, I think about that raft sometimes, about how sure I was that I could just build something and head off into adventure. I suppose in a way I eventually did that, just not quite how my 8-year-old self imagined it." Adelaide laughed softly. "I love that story. It makes you seem more real somehow, knowing you were once a little boy with big dreams and failed rafts." "I was definitely that. My mother used to say I had more ambition than sense, which was probably true." Vincent's expression grew softer. "She died about 5 years ago. Heart just gave out one day while she was hanging laundry. My sisters wrote to tell me, but by the time I got the letter, she had been buried for 3 months already. That is one of the hard parts about living out here. You miss things, important things." "I am sorry," Adelaide said quietly. "That must have been terrible, getting that news so late." "It was. but I have made peace with it, or as much peace as a man can make with losing his mother." Vincent looked at her across the fire. "You are going to have to make peace with your losses too, eventually. It will not feel possible for a long time, but slowly the pain will get duller. It never goes away completely, but it becomes something you can carry instead of something that crushes you." Adelaide nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, listening to the crackle of the fire and the sound of Vincent moving quietly around the camp. His presence was a comfort in the darkness, a reminder that she was not alone in the wilderness with her grief. When she woke in the early morning hours, Vincent was still awake, silhouetted against the dying fire. Adelaide watched him for a moment, this mountain man who had appeared as if summoned by her desperate prayer. Then she closed her eyes again and slept more soundly than she had since her father had first fallen ill. The next 2 days fell into a pattern that became almost comfortable, despite the difficult terrain and Adelaide's ongoing grief. Vincent would wake her at dawn. They would break camp efficiently, and then they would travel through the mountains with him teaching her and her learning as fast as she could. Adelaide discovered that she had a natural aptitude for reading the wilderness when Vincent showed her what to look for. She learned to spot game trails, to identify edible plants, to understand how water flowed through the landscape. Vincent was a patient teacher, never making her feel stupid for not knowing things, always willing to explain something multiple times if she did not understand. And with each passing day, Adelaide found herself more drawn to him. It was not just gratitude, though she was certainly grateful. It was something deeper, something that sparked to life when their hands accidentally touched while packing up camp, or when he would smile at her across the fire, or when she would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Vincent seemed to feel something too, though he was clearly trying to maintain proper distance. Adelaide would catch him starting to reach out to help her, and then pulling back, or see him open his mouth to say something before thinking better of it. There was a tension building between them, sweet and slightly scary in its intensity. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Vincent pointed to a valley below them. "There," he said, "that is Valentine." Adelaide's heart leaped as she saw the collection of buildings nestled in the valley, smoke rising from chimneys, people moving through the streets, civilization, safety, the end of this particular trial. But as they began the descent toward the town, Adelaide felt a surge of something that was not quite relief. Because reaching Valentine meant the end of her time with Vincent, and she was not ready for that. Not ready at all. The town was bigger than Adelaide had expected, clearly growing fast as more people pushed west in search of opportunity and new starts. Buildings lined a main street that was churned to mud from wagon wheels and horse hooves. She could see a general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and various other establishments that marked a thriving frontier community. Vincent guided her wagon down the main street, seemingly unconcerned about the stares his presence drew. Adelaide supposed a mountain man on a massive roan horse leading a wagon driven by a young woman made quite a sight. "Your aunt's boarding house," Vincent said. "Do you know where it is?" "No, but we can ask someone." Adelaide pulled the wagon to a stop near the general store, and Vincent dismounted to help her down. His hands were warm and strong around her waist, and he held on perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary before releasing her. Inside the store, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a friendly smile greeted them. "Help you folks? I am looking for my aunt," Adelaide said. "Her name is Margaret Barrett. I was told she runs a boarding house here." The woman's face lit up. "Oh, Maggie's place. Sure, I know it. 2 streets over, big white house with green shutters. You cannot miss it. Are you family then?" "Yes, her niece from Pennsylvania," Adelaide Bennett. Well, welcome to Valentine, dear. Maggie has mentioned you in passing. I am sure she will be thrilled to see you. The woman's eyes moved to Vincent with undisguised curiosity. And you would be? Just someone who helped Miss Bennett find her way here, Vincent said smoothly. Good day, madam. He guided Adelaide back outside before the woman could ask more questions. Margaret Barrett's boarding house was indeed impossible to miss. A well-maintained two-story structure that spoke of prosperity and care. Adelaide's stomach churned with nervousness as Vincent helped her down from the wagon again, and they walked up to the front door together. A woman answered their knock almost immediately. She was in her late 40s, with Adelaide's same dark hair now streaked with gray and eyes that were kind despite the lines of grief etched around them. Yes, she said, then stopped as she really looked at Adelaide. Oh, my lord, Adelaide. Little Adelaide Bennett. Hello, Aunt Margaret, Adelaide said, her voice breaking. I am sorry to arrive without warning, but I had no way to send word ahead. My parents, they both died of fever on the trail. I had nowhere else to go. Margaret's face crumpled with grief and sympathy. She pulled Adelaide into a fierce embrace, and suddenly, Adelaide was sobbing against her aunt's shoulder, letting out all the fear and pain and exhaustion she had been holding inside for days. Oh, you poor dear, you poor, brave dear, Margaret murmured, stroking Adelaide's hair. Come inside, come in right now. You are safe here. You are home. Adelaide pulled back enough to gesture at Vincent. This is Vincent Ellis. He found me lost in the mountains and guided me here. I would not have made it without him. Margaret turned to Vincent with an expression of deep gratitude. Then I owe you a debt I can never repay, Mr. Ellis. Please, come inside. Let me fix you both some food and hear the whole story. Vincent hesitated, and Adelaide saw him glance back at his horse and her wagon. I should probably be getting back to the mountains, madam. I do not do well in towns for very long. Nonsense, Margaret said firmly. You will come inside and let me feed you a proper meal at the very least. It is the least I can do for the man who saved my niece's life. And we need to talk about getting Adelaide's wagon and horses properly stabled. Vincent looked at Adelaide, and she saw something in his eyes that looked like reluctance mixed with longing. Please stay, she said softly. Just for a little while. I want to make sure you get a good meal before you head back into the wilderness. He could not seem to refuse her. All right. Just for a little while. Margaret's boarding house was warm and welcoming inside, with comfortable furniture and the smell of something delicious cooking. She sat them at a large dining table and immediately began preparing food while firing questions about what had happened. Adelaide told the story haltingly, with Vincent filling in details when she could not continue. Margaret cried when Adelaide described burying her parents, and she reached across the table to grip her niece's hand tightly. Your mother was my baby sister, Margaret said, her voice thick with tears. We were so close before I left Pennsylvania. I should have stayed in better contact. I should have insisted they come visit. Now it is too late. They loved you, Adelaide assured her. Mother spoke of you often, always with affection. Margaret wiped her eyes and turned to Vincent with renewed gratitude. And you appeared just when she needed you most. That is nothing short of miraculous. Just good timing, madam, Vincent said, looking uncomfortable with the attention. I think it was more than that, Adelaide said quietly, meeting his eyes. I prayed for help, and you appeared the next morning. That feels like more than coincidence to me. Vincent held her gaze, and Adelaide felt that same electric connection she had been feeling for the past 3 days. Something unspoken passed between them, something that made her heart beat faster. Margaret watched this exchange with interest, her eyes sharpening with understanding. Mr. Ellis, I hope you will consider staying in town for a few days. I have rooms available, and I would love to repay your kindness with a comfortable bed and good meals. Free of charge, of course." "That is generous, madam, but I really should be getting back," Vincent started to say, but Adelaide interrupted him. "Please stay," she said. "Just for a day or two. I want to be able to thank you properly. And I feel like we barely got to really talk during the journey because we were so focused on just getting here safely." Vincent looked torn, his eyes moving between Adelaide's pleading face and the door that represented escape back to his solitary mountain life. Finally, he sighed. "One night. I will stay one night and then I need to get back. I have traps that need checking and supplies that will not last forever." "One night is better than nothing," Adelaide said, feeling relief and something warmer flood through her. One more night to figure out what these feelings meant. One more night to talk to him without the constant pressure of survival hanging over them. Margaret showed Vincent to a room on the second floor, giving him towels and telling him dinner would be ready in an hour. Then she pulled Adelaide aside, her expression serious. "That man is in love with you," Margaret said bluntly. "And unless I am very much mistaken, you feel the same way about him." Adelaide felt heat flood her face. "Aunt Margaret, I cannot be in love with him. I have known him for 3 days and my parents just died." "It would be inappropriate and too fast, and hearts do not care about appropriate timing," Margaret interrupted gently. "I fell in love with my Henry the day I met him. We were married 3 weeks later, and we had 22 wonderful years together before he died." "Love does not follow rules or schedules, Adelaide. It just happens." "But he lives alone in the mountains," Adelaide protested. "He has made it very clear that he does not want to be part of regular society, and I just got here. I need to figure out my own life before I can think about anything else." "All true," Margaret agreed. "But that does not change what I saw pass between you two at that table. He looked at you like you were water and he had been dying of thirst, and you looked at him the same way." Adelaide sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "I do not know what to do. I am so confused about everything. Part of me wants to ask him to stay, but that is selfish. His life is in the mountains. I cannot ask him to give that up." "Maybe you should talk to him," Margaret suggested. "Really talk to him, not about survival or directions, but about how you both feel. You might be surprised what comes out of that conversation." Before Adelaide could respond, there was a knock at the door. Margaret went to answer it and returned with a young man who introduced himself as Thomas from the livery stable. He had come about Adelaide's horses and wagon, which Vincent had arranged to have properly cared for. The practical matter of settling the horses took Adelaide's mind off her emotional turmoil for a little while. By the time she returned to the boarding house, Vincent had cleaned up and changed into fresh clothes he had evidently brought in his saddlebags. Without the trail dust and with his hair clean and hanging loose past his shoulders, he was even more striking than before. Dinner was a quiet affair, with Margaret carrying most of the conversation while Adelaide and Vincent stole glances at each other across the table. The food was excellent. A roasted chicken with potatoes and carrots that reminded Adelaide painfully of her mother's cooking, but she barely tasted it. After dinner, Margaret excused herself with a transparency that would have been funny under other circumstances. "I have some work to do on the accounts," she announced. "Adelaide, why do not you show Mr. Ellis the garden out back? It is quite lovely in the evening light." The garden was indeed lovely, carefully tended with flowers and vegetables growing in neat rows. Adelaide and Vincent walked along a path between the beds, not speaking at first, just being near each other. "Your aunt seems like a good woman," Vincent finally said. "She is. I am so grateful she has agreed to take me in. I was terrified she might not want the burden of an unexpected niece." Adelaide stopped beside a rose bush and touched one of the blooms gently. I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time since my parents got sick." "I am glad," Vincent said quietly. "You deserve to feel safe and cared for." Adelaide turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Vincent, I need to tell you something, and I am just going to say it plain because I do not know any other way. These past 3 days with you have meant more to me than I can express. You saved my life, yes, but it was more than that. You made me feel capable and strong. You taught me things and listened to me and treated me like I mattered. And I think I have started to develop feelings for you that go beyond gratitude." Vincent's eyes widened slightly, and Adelaide could see him warring with something internal. "Adelaide, you have been through an enormous trauma. Your parents just died. Your entire world has been turned upside down. What you are feeling right now, it might just be your mind trying to latch onto something stable in the middle of all that chaos." "Do not tell me what I am feeling," Adelaide said with more heat than she intended. "I know my own mind. Yes, I am grieving. Yes, my world has been destroyed and I am trying to rebuild it. But what I feel when I look at you is real. It is not just gratitude or trauma or confusion. It is real." Vincent took a step closer to her, and Adelaide could see the intensity in his eyes. "You do not understand what you would be getting into. I am not a town man. I cannot be what you need. I live alone in a cabin miles from anywhere, and I like it that way. I do not know how to be part of regular society anymore. The war broke something in me that maybe cannot be fixed." "I am not asking you to be fixed," Adelaide said softly. "I am just telling you how I feel. What you do with that information is up to you." They stood inches apart in the fading light, and Adelaide could see every detail of Vincent's face, every weathered line, every scar. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "If I kiss you right now," Vincent said, his voice rough, "I am not going to be able to walk away tomorrow. You need to understand that. I have spent 3 days trying to keep my distance, trying to do the right thing, but if I kiss you, that is done. I will not be able to leave you." Adelaide's breath caught. "Then kiss me." Vincent's hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their strength. He looked into her eyes for a long moment, as if memorizing her features, and then he bent his head and kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste kisses Adelaide had received from a few awkward suitors back in Pennsylvania. This was fire and need and recognition, as if their souls had been searching for each other and finally found home. Vincent's lips were warm and firm, and when Adelaide responded, he deepened the kiss with a hunger that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I told you," he said roughly. "I told you I would not be able to leave." "Then do not leave," Adelaide whispered. "Stay here, stay with me, we will figure everything else out." Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his massive arms around her, and Adelaide felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the garden while the stars began to emerge overhead. "I do not know how to do this," Vincent admitted. "I have not been with anyone since before the war. I do not know how to be in a relationship or live in a town or be what you need." "You are already what I need," Adelaide said. "You appeared when I prayed for help. You guided me safely here. You made me feel strong and capable. You kissed me like I was precious. That is already everything I need. The rest we can learn together." Vincent laughed softly, the sound rumbling through his chest. "You are going to be the death of me, Adelaide Bennett. You and your prayers and your beautiful eyes and your courage." "Is that a yes?" Adelaide asked, pulling back to look up at him. "Are you staying?" "I am staying," Vincent confirmed, and then he kissed her again, softer this time but no less intense. When they finally came back inside, Margaret took one look at their faces and smiled. "So you two worked things out, I take it." "He is staying," Adelaide announced, unable to keep the joy out of her voice. "Of course he is," Margaret said placidly. "I already prepared a second room for a longer stay. I had a feeling you would convince him." Over the next several days, Vincent integrated himself into life in Valentine with a difficulty that Adelaide had expected, but that still pained her to watch. He was used to solitude and silence, and the bustle of the town clearly made him uncomfortable. He would tense whenever crowds formed on the main street, and Adelaide could see him fighting the urge to retreat to the wilderness. But he stayed. He stayed because of her, and that knowledge was both humbling and empowering. Vincent Ellis, the mountain man who had built a life of solitude, was trying to change that life because of feelings he had developed for her. Adelaide tried to make it easier for him. She suggested walks on the outskirts of town where there were fewer people. She talked to him about his cabin in the mountains and his life there, making it clear that she was genuinely interested. And slowly, Vincent began to relax slightly, finding his footing in this new reality. Margaret proved to be an invaluable ally. She liked Vincent immediately and approved of the relationship with an enthusiasm that sometimes embarrassed Adelaide. "That man would walk through fire for you," Margaret said one morning while they were preparing breakfast. "And in return, you are giving him a reason to rejoin the world. It is a good trade." 2 weeks after arriving in Valentine, Adelaide and Vincent went for a long walk that took them to the edge of town and into the foothills beyond. Vincent visibly relaxed as the buildings fell away behind them, his shoulders losing their tension, his breathing becoming deeper. "This is hard for you," Adelaide said. It was not a question. "Yes," Vincent admitted, "but not as hard as being without you would be. I have spent 8 years running from connection, from intimacy, from anything that made me feel too much. You crashed into my life like an avalanche, and now I cannot imagine going back to how things were before." "Do you regret it?" Adelaide asked quietly. "Helping me, I mean. If you had known it would lead to all this, would you still have followed my tracks that morning?" Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Not for 1 second. Finding you was the best thing that has happened to me since I left Missouri. You make me want to be better, to try harder, to open myself up to possibility again. That is terrifying, but it is also wonderful." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you," she said simply. "I know it is fast and probably seems crazy, but I love you, Vincent Ellis. I think I started loving you the moment you promised to get me safely to Valentine." Vincent pulled her close, his arms surrounding her completely. "I love you too. I have been trying not to say it because it seemed too soon, but God help me, Adelaide, I love you so much it scares me. I did not think I was capable of feeling this way anymore." They kissed there in the foothills with the town of Valentine spread out below them and the mountains rising behind them, caught between two worlds but creating their own space that incorporated both. "I have been thinking," Vincent said when they finally pulled apart. "My cabin in the mountains, it is a good cabin, strong and weatherproof with a creek nearby and plenty of game. But it is built for one person. If you wanted, I could expand it, make it bigger, add a real bedroom and a proper kitchen, make it a home instead of just a shelter." Adelaide's heart began to race. "Are you asking what I think you are asking? I am asking if you would consider marrying me and coming to live in the mountains. I know it would not be an easy life. It is isolated and harsh and nothing like what you are used to, but I would take care of you. I would love you and protect you and do everything in my power to make you happy. And we would not be completely cut off. We could come to Valentine every month or so, visit your aunt, get supplies. It would not have to be total isolation." Adelaide thought about it, really thought about it. A few weeks ago, the idea of living in the mountains would have terrified her. But she had already learned so much from Vincent about wilderness survival. She had discovered strengths in herself she had not known existed. And the idea of building a life with this man, just the two of them against the wilderness, felt right in a way that nothing else ever had. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, I will marry you and come to the mountains with you, but on one condition." "Anything," Vincent said immediately. "We spend this first year going back and forth. I want to learn everything you can teach me about mountain life. I want to become truly competent at survival skills before we commit to living there full time. And I want to spend time with my aunt, get to know her again. I just found her. I do not want to disappear into the wilderness right away." Vincent nodded, clearly relieved that her condition was so reasonable. "That is more than fair. We can spend spring and summer in the mountains when the weather is good and I can really teach you. Then we come back to Valentine for fall and winter, which are brutal up there anyway. By next spring, you will know enough to make a truly informed decision about whether you can handle that life permanently." "That sounds perfect," Adelaide said, and kissed him again. They were married 3 weeks later in Valentine's small church, with Margaret crying happily and half the town showing up out of curiosity about the mountain man who had captured Adelaide Bennett's heart. Vincent looked uncomfortable in borrowed formal clothes, but when he spoke his vows, his voice was strong and clear, promising to love and protect Adelaide for all of his days. Adelaide wore a simple dress that Margaret had helped her make, white with blue embroidery, and she felt beautiful under Vincent's adoring gaze. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with enough passion to make several of the older ladies gasp, and Margaret laughed delightedly. The reception at Margaret's boarding house was simple but joyful, with music and dancing and food. Vincent tolerated it better than Adelaide had expected, though she could tell he was counting the hours until they could escape to the privacy of the room Margaret had prepared for them as a wedding gift. Finally, as the sun set and the party began to wind down, they slipped away. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, with Vincent showing Adelaide physical pleasures she had never imagined while murmuring words of love against her skin. He was gentle with her inexperience, patient and attentive, making sure she felt cherished and safe. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his massive chest, Adelaide felt a peace she had not experienced since before her parents had gotten sick. "I cannot believe this is my life now," she said softly. "A few weeks ago I was alone and terrified, and now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met." "Prayers do get answered sometimes," Vincent said, running his fingers through her hair. "You prayed for help and I found you. Now we have each other." "We have each other," Adelaide repeated, and fell asleep to the steady rhythm of her husband's heartbeat. True to their plan, they spent the next year moving between the mountains and Valentine. Vincent taught Adelaide everything he knew about wilderness survival, and she proved to be an excellent student. She learned to hunt and fish, to track game and identify plants, to read weather patterns and find her way through trackless forest. But more than just survival skills, Adelaide learned to love the wilderness itself. She came to appreciate the profound silence of the mountains, broken only by wind and water and animal calls. She learned to find peace in the solitude, to enjoy the simplicity of a life without constant social demands. Vincent's cabin became their haven. He expanded it as promised, adding a larger bedroom and a proper kitchen, building furniture with his own hands. Adelaide decorated it with curtains she sewed and small touches that made it feel like a home rather than just a shelter. They worked side by side, building a life together literally and figuratively. Their visits to Valentine were joyful reunions with Margaret, who delighted in hearing about their mountain life. Adelaide helped her aunt with the boarding house, and Vincent would do repairs and heavy work in exchange for their lodging. The town gradually grew accustomed to seeing the mountain man and his wife, and while Vincent never became truly comfortable with crowds, he managed better than Adelaide had initially feared. In the spring of their second year together, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The news both thrilled and terrified her, bringing up fears about childbirth in the isolated cabin. But Vincent proved to be as steady as ever, promising to bring her to Valentine well before her due date so she could deliver the baby with proper help available. Their son was born in December of 1877, a healthy boy with Vincent's blue-green eyes and Adelaide's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Vincent's father who had died before the war. The birth was difficult but ultimately successful, with Margaret and the town doctor in attendance. Vincent held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his weathered face. "I did not think I would ever have this," he said hoarsely. "A wife and a child, a real family. I thought I had given up the possibility of it when I went to the mountains." "You prayed for me whether you knew it or not," Adelaide said, exhausted but happy. "You needed someone to bring you back to life as much as I needed someone to save me. We saved each other." They stayed in Valentine through the winter, so Adelaide could recover and learn to care for an infant with Margaret's experienced help. Vincent proved to be a devoted father, patient with the baby's crying and eager to help with every aspect of care. Watching this powerful mountain man cradling their tiny son with such tenderness made Adelaide fall even more deeply in love with him. When spring came, they returned to the mountains as a family of 3. Vincent had built a cradle for Thomas during the winter months, and they established new routines that incorporated the baby into their wilderness life. It was not always easy, but they managed together, supporting each other through the challenges. Years passed, measured in seasons and snowfalls and the growth of their children. 2 more babies followed Thomas, a daughter they named Margaret for Adelaide's aunt, and another son they named James. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, and Adelaide became as competent in the wilderness as Vincent himself. Margaret visited sometimes during the summer months, marveling at the life her niece had built in the mountains. "You are happy here," she said during one visit, watching Adelaide expertly skin a rabbit while keeping an eye on 3 playing children. "Truly happy. I can see it in everything you do." "I am," Adelaide confirmed. "I never imagined this would be my life, but I cannot imagine any other life now. Vincent and we were meant to find each other. I truly believe that." "So do I," Margaret said softly. "Your mother would be proud of you, Adelaide. You took tragedy and turned it into something beautiful." As Adelaide approached her 30th birthday, she and Vincent were sitting on the porch of their cabin one evening, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were asleep inside, and the world was peaceful. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked suddenly. "Giving up the possibility of an easier life in town for this?" Adelaide took his large, scarred hand in both of hers. "Not for a single moment. This is exactly where I am supposed to be, with you, with our children in these mountains. You were the answer to my prayer 8 years ago, but I think I was the answer to yours too, even if you did not realize you were praying." Vincent smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "You were absolutely the answer to a prayer I did not know how to say. You saved me as much as I saved you." They sat together in the gathering darkness, hands intertwined, watching stars emerge one by one in the vast sky above the Colorado mountains. Behind them in the cabin, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the wilderness that had brought them together stretched in every direction. Adelaide thought back to that terrible night when she had knelt beside her wagon and prayed desperately for help, for someone to appear and save her. She had never imagined that the answer would come in the form of a mountain man with blue-green eyes and a heart that had been waiting to be reopened. She had never imagined she would find not just survival but love, not just safety but purpose, not just shelter but a true home. Vincent had appeared the morning after her prayer like a miracle made flesh, and together they had built something stronger than either of them could have created alone. Their love story had begun in desperation and fear, but it had grown into something beautiful and enduring, rooted in the mountains and reaching toward the sky. As the last light faded and Vincent pulled her close, Adelaide whispered a prayer of gratitude for the strength that had been given to her, for the man who had appeared when she needed him most, and for the life they had built together in the wild west of Colorado. It was not the life she had expected or planned for, but it was perfect in ways she could never have anticipated. The mountain man had found her praying for strength, and he had appeared the next morning to become everything she needed and more. In return, she had given him reason to rejoin the world, to love again, to build a family and a future. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had created something that would endure long after they were gone. Their children grew strong and capable in the wilderness, learning from both parents how to survive and thrive in the harsh beauty of the mountains. Thomas became as skilled a tracker as his father, while Margaret inherited her mother's quick intelligence and adaptability. Little James, still too young to show his full potential, toddled after his older siblings with determined enthusiasm. By the time Adelaide was 35, the cabin had been expanded twice more and had become a genuine homestead, with a small barn for the horses and a chicken coop that provided fresh eggs. They had even planted a garden that, while challenging in the mountain soil, produced enough vegetables to supplement their diet of game and foraged foods. Vincent had aged well, his long dark hair now streaked with silver, his beard fully gray. The years of hard living had left their mark on his face and body, but he remained powerfully built and capable. Adelaide loved every weathered line, every scar, every sign of the life they had lived together. She herself had changed from the frightened young woman who had prayed beside a wagon 8 years ago. She was lean and strong now, her hands calloused from work, her eyes confident. She could shoot as well as Vincent, could track almost as well, could navigate the wilderness with assurance. But more importantly, she had found a deep contentment in this life that she knew was rare and precious. They still made regular trips to Valentine, now with a wagon full of furs and preserved game to trade for supplies and luxuries. Margaret's boarding house remained their home base in town, though Adelaide's aunt was slowing down with age. Adelaide helped her manage the business during their visits, and they had begun discussing the possibility of Adelaide's oldest son eventually taking over the boarding house when he was grown. On one particular trip to Valentine when Adelaide was 36, they encountered a young couple in circumstances eerily similar to Adelaide's own situation years before. The woman, hardly more than 20, had just lost her husband to an accident on the trail and was stranded with no money and no family. Adelaide and Vincent looked at each other, the same thought clearly occurring to both of them. They approached the young woman, and Adelaide sat down beside her. "My name is Adelaide Ellis," she said gently, "and I want you to know that what you are going through right now, this impossible situation, it will get better. I know because I was where you are 8 years ago. I lost both my parents on the trail, and I was completely alone and terrified. But help came, and I survived, and I built a good life. You can too." The woman looked at her with desperate hope, and Adelaide spent the next hour telling her story and arranging for the woman to have a job helping Margaret at the boarding house. As they walked away, Vincent put his arm around Adelaide. "You are a good woman, Adelaide Ellis," he said softly. "You remember where you came from and you help others the way you were helped. That is the kind of thing that makes the world better." "I learned it from you," Adelaide replied. "You helped a stranger when you did not have to, and it changed both our lives. I am just passing that forward." That night, lying in their room at Margaret's boarding house with Vincent's arms around her, Adelaide reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had lost everything, prayed desperately for help, and received it in the most unexpected form. She had fallen in love with a mountain man who had forgotten how to be part of the world. Together they had built a life that incorporated the best of both the wilderness and civilization, raising children who were confident and capable, creating a home filled with love. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent murmured against her hair. "About prayers," Adelaide said. "About how sometimes they get answered in ways we never could have predicted. About how you appeared the morning after I prayed, and everything changed." "I think about that sometimes too," Vincent admitted. "About how I woke up that morning with such a strong feeling that I needed to go south, even though it made no logical sense. About how I found your tracks and followed them, and there you were. It felt like destiny." "Maybe it was," Adelaide said. "Maybe some things are meant to be, and the universe finds ways to push us in the right directions. All I know is that I am grateful. Every day I am grateful for you and for this life we have built." Vincent kissed her temple, his beard soft against her skin. "I am the one who should be grateful. You saved me from a life of loneliness I did not even realize was slowly killing me. You gave me purpose and love and a family. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Adelaide." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had done for thousands of nights since that first awkward wedding night. The ease and comfort between them had only grown deeper with time, forged by shared challenges and daily choices to love and support each other. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joys and triumphs. Thomas grew into a young man as capable as his father, eventually courting a young woman from Valentine and building his own cabin not far from his parents. Margaret followed a few years later, marrying a shopkeeper's son and moving to Valentine to help her great-aunt with the boarding house. James, the youngest, showed signs of wanting to follow his father's footsteps into the wilderness. Vincent and Adelaide grew older together, their hair silvering, their bodies bearing the marks of a hard life well lived. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by decades of partnership and mutual respect. On their 20th anniversary, Vincent took Adelaide to the spot where he had first found her, which they had visited many times over the years. He had carved a marker there, a simple stone that read, "Where Everything Began, 1876. 20 years, Vincent said, his arm around her waist. 20 years since I found you praying beside that wagon. Do you remember how scared you were?" "I remember everything about that night," Adelaide said. "The darkness, the fear, the desperate prayer. I remember thinking I was going to die alone in the wilderness. And then you appeared the next morning like an answer made flesh. Best thing I ever did was follow that feeling and come looking for what was wrong," Vincent said. "Changed my entire life in the best possible way." Adelaide leaned into his solid warmth. "We have built something good, have we not? A life worth living, children who are happy and capable, a home that sustains us." "We have built something extraordinary," Vincent corrected. "Something I never thought I would have. You gave me that, Adelaide. You and your prayers and your courage and your love." They stood there for a long time, remembering and celebrating, before heading back to their cabin where a fire waited and their life together continued. The story of the mountain man who found a woman praying for strength, and became the answer she needed, was told often in Valentine over the years. It became a local legend, a reminder that help could come from unexpected places, and that love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances. When Adelaide was in her 50s, now a grandmother several times over, a young journalist from Denver came to Valentine to collect stories of the Old West. He heard about Adelaide and Vincent and asked if he could interview them. They agreed, and over the course of several days, Adelaide told their story from beginning to end. The journalist was fascinated, asking questions and taking copious notes. "What would you say was the most important moment in your entire story?" he asked finally. "The turning point that made everything else possible." Adelaide thought about it carefully. "The moment I decided to pray," she said finally. "I was at the absolute lowest point of my life, and I made the choice to ask for help instead of giving up. That prayer opened me up to receiving the help when it came. If I had not prayed, if I had not been in that specific mental and spiritual place, I might not have trusted Vincent when he appeared. I might have been too scared or too proud or too broken to accept his help." "And for you, Mr. Ellis?" the journalist asked Vincent. "The moment I decided to follow that feeling and go south even though it did not make sense," Vincent said. "I could have ignored it, gone about my normal routine. But I listened to something deeper than logic, and it led me to Adelaide. That decision to follow intuition over reason changed everything." The journalist published their story in a Denver newspaper, and it was picked up by several other publications. Suddenly, Adelaide and Vincent found themselves minor celebrities, with people occasionally making the journey to their mountain cabin just to meet the couple from the famous story. Vincent tolerated it with his usual gruff patience, but Adelaide could tell it bothered him. After a particularly intrusive visit from a group of curiosity seekers, he suggested they take a long trip, just the two of them, deep into the wilderness where no one would find them. They spent a month in the remotest parts of the Colorado Rockies, carrying only what they needed on their backs, living off the land as Vincent had taught Adelaide to do decades before. It was reminiscent of their early days together, when everything was new and challenging, and they had only each other to rely on. One night, camping beside a crystal-clear mountain lake with the Milky Way blazing overhead, Adelaide felt a profound sense of completion. She had lived a full life, loved deeply, raised children, helped others, and built something lasting. Whatever time remained was a gift. "I am at peace," she said to Vincent as they lay in their bedroll under the stars. "Completely at peace with the life I have lived and the choices I have made." "Are you?" Vincent was quiet for a moment before answering. "I am. There are things I regret from before I met you, things I did in the war that I cannot take back. But from the moment I found you beside that wagon, I have tried to be the man you deserved. I have tried to build something good and true. I think I have succeeded, mostly because you were beside me every step of the way." "We succeeded together," Adelaide corrected. "Neither of us could have done this alone. That is what makes it beautiful." They returned to their cabin eventually, back to the rhythm of their days, the visits from children and grandchildren, the trips to Valentine. Life continued, full and rich and meaningful. Vincent passed away in his sleep during the winter of 1899, just shy of his 65th birthday. Adelaide woke to find him cold beside her, his weathered face peaceful. The grief was profound but not bitter. They had had nearly 25 years together, years filled with love and purpose. He had lived to see all three of their children grown and settled, had held numerous grandchildren, had built a legacy of strength and kindness. Adelaide buried him on the mountain overlooking their cabin, in a spot he had often said was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. She carved the stone herself, her hands still strong despite her age. Vincent Ellis, 1835–1899. Mountain man, husband, father, he appeared when prayers were answered. She lived another 5 years after Vincent's death, spending her time between the mountain cabin and Valentine, surrounded by family. She taught her grandchildren the skills Vincent had taught her, told them stories of their grandfather and the life they had built together, made sure they understood the value of courage and love, and listening to the quiet voice that sometimes guides people to where they need to be. Adelaide passed away peacefully in 1904, sitting in a chair on the porch of the mountain cabin with a blanket across her lap and the sun on her face. She was 70 years old, and her last words were reported by her grandson James to be, "He is here. Vincent is here to take me home." They buried her beside Vincent on the mountain, and their descendants maintained the cabin and the graves for generations. The story of their love, of the mountain man who found a woman praying for strength and became everything she needed, was passed down through the family and throughout Valentine. It became more than just a story. It became a reminder that prayers are sometimes answered, that help comes in unexpected forms, that love can bloom in the harshest circumstances, and that two broken people can heal each other and build something that endures long after they are gone. The cabin still stands today, maintained by descendants and historical preservation societies. Visitors can see the home that Vincent and Adelaide built, can stand on the porch where they watched countless sunsets, can visit the graves on the mountain, and read the inscriptions that tell their story in the briefest terms. But the real story, the full story, lives on in the hearts and memories of those who heard it firsthand or learned it from family. It is a story of desperation transformed into hope, of loneliness transformed into love, of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build a life together against all odds. Adelaide's prayer beside that wagon in 1876 was answered the next morning when Vincent appeared. But in a deeper sense, both their prayers were answered, the spoken and the unspoken, the desperate plea for help and the quiet longing for purpose and connection. They saved each other, loved each other, and created something that outlasted their individual lives. In the end, that is what made their story worth telling and retelling across generations. Not just the drama of the rescue or the romance of the mountain setting, but the fundamental truth at its core, that sometimes when we are at our lowest, when we have nothing left but hope and prayer, the universe sends us exactly what we need, often in forms we never could have imagined. And if we are brave enough to accept that help, to trust in possibility, to open our hearts even when we are terrified, we might just find that our prayers lead us not just to survival, but to truly living, to loving, and to building lives of profound meaning and joy.